It is a pleasure to introduce and welcome Dr. David Laibson. Dr. David Laibson is a Robert Goldman Professor of Economics and Chair of the Department of Economics at Harvard University. He received his BA from Harvard, MSc from London School of Economics, and received his Ph.D. from MIT. His research focuses on the topic of behavioral economics, with emphasis on household finance, microeconomics, aging, and intertemporal choice, which relates to today's topic. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and serves on the board of the Russell Sage Foundation and on Harvard's Pension Investment Committee, as well as the advisory board of the Social Science Genetics Association Consortium, and among many other important roles he has. He's a recipient of a Marshall Scholarship and TIA CREF Paul Samuelson Award for outstanding scholarly writing on lifelong financial security. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Laibson.
Good evening, everyone. I first want to thank the organizers of this event, especially my good friend Yuichi, for inviting me to speak with all of you this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions after this talk. So I'm going to talk about present bias, behavioral economics, and the science of behavior change, which follows on a lot of the themes that you just heard about from Yuichi. So I want to contrast behavioral economics, which is where I'll focus, with the traditional approach to economics, mainstream economics. In this traditional approach, I'll call it classical approach, there are two core principles. People know what's in their best interest, and they act on that. So if that's the world we live in, then we should influence people with financial incentives, education, informational disclosure, because they'll take all of those incentives and act optimally. So we're going to test these classical assertions. You're already, it's absurd. We're going to test these classical assertions with some evidence. Let's begin by thinking about 401ks, the ways that most households in the US are saving for retirement. In a 401k, typically, contributions are matched by the employer of the worker. And it's particularly appealing if people are over age 59 and a half, because over that age threshold, you can put money into the 401k, and at most employers, you can take it right back out the next day, and you get to keep the employer match. So this is free money. It's an arbitrage opportunity. And we find in the data that only about half of employees contribute up to this match threshold. So they're losing out on this free money, and they're making a pretty grave mistake. On average, in the US, employees are losing 1.6% of their salary per year by not taking full advantage of this employer match. Now, when I first discovered this with my collaborators, James Choi and Bridget Madrian, we thought that this was a mistake that could easily be corrected if we only explained to people the overwhelming logic of taking full advantage of the employer match. If only people understood that they could put their money in, get matched by their employer, and then if they need the money, take it right back out and keep the match. So we ran a study. We ran a randomized control trial with employees in this age group, and we explained to them in this trial, for those in the treatment group, in the education arm of the study, that they could contribute to the 401k plan and then withdraw their contributions at any time without paying a penalty, and they could keep their employer's matching funds. And we had them actually calculate how much money they were losing by not doing this. These were all people who were not yet contributing at the employer match threshold. On average, they were losing $1,200 per year by contributing at this low level. Now, what do you think this intervention did, this educational intervention explaining to people they could have $1,200 extra per year simply by contributing to their 401k plan, and that if they needed the money, they could just take it right back out, so they wouldn't be losing the contribution, even in the short run? Do you think this would work? Do you think this would help people understand the error of their ways, and we would see a radical change in their behavior? I did. I did believe when we ran this study that this would be the key to transforming behavior in the US. If only people understood this, they would be very different in their behavior. So how much did contributions increase among this newly educated group? I want you all to guess what number would be the right number as a percentage of people's income. Well, 100% is big. They only match up to 6% of your income. So the largest effect you might expect would be an increase of 6% of one's income. What do you think? So 1.5 to 0.1% of pay. So that's not 10% of pay, that's 1/10 of 1% of pay. Essentially, no impact at all. So the classical view in economics is that incentives in education are highly effective, but we're beginning to realize that they don't quite work as well as advertised in the classical economics textbook. There's a behavioral economics view, and this is this new field that fuses psychology and economics, that says that it doesn't quite work the way we thought it did. And often, other interventions are going to be more effective than educating people or giving them financial incentives. Now, here's an example from the health domain. This is from New York City. This is a study by Elbel et al. As you may know, in New York City, about 10 years ago, they introduced a calorie disclosure law in fast food restaurants. And a lot of people thought, indeed, the policymakers in New York thought, that if only people knew the calories in French fries and hamburgers, they would eat more healthfully. Now, there was a control city, Newark, right across the river, that didn't have these laws. So New York introduced the law. Newark did not introduce the law. So we're going to compare what happened in New York to what happened in Newark. I've blanked out the New York result. I want you to, again, guess what happened. In Newark, as you can see, nothing happened, and that's as you would expect, because there was no change in the calorie disclosures. What happened in New York? How did calorie disclosure affect calories per purchase in New York City at the time of this? Right, good, you're with me now. So did it lower? Did it have no effect? The answer is it had no effect. Now it looks like it raised calories per purchase, but indeed, once you think about the noise in this data, essentially you cannot reject the claim of no effect. So what is behavioral economics? Behavioral economics does not deny the fundamental fact that economic incentives and information do matter. We are not, completely unaffected by those factors, but other factors matter too. And it's appropriate that with the psychology department advertising and hosting this event, it's psychological factors that matter too, that economists have been overlooking all these years. Limited rationality, limited attention, imperfect self-control, which I'll focus on tonight, so I've put it in red, and social preferences. We could spend a whole week talking about all the different mechanisms that we need to add to the economic model of human behavior. Now, in addition to these psychological factors, I also want to highlight that behavioral nudges targeted at the psychological roots of self-defeating behavior can be highly effective in influencing people's choices. And these behavioral nudges, as we'll see, are easily scaled. So let me begin with this discussion of some of the psychological roots of self-defeating behavior. And I'll begin with an experiment that was done in Holland with non-student subjects, so these are actual workers in a Dutch firm. They're approached by researchers, Reed and Ben Lewin are the authors of this study, and the researchers say to these individuals, hey, we're doing a study on food preferences, and we're going to come back in a week's time, so not today, in a week's time we're going to come back and we're going to bring you snacks, but you have to choose today the snack you want us to deliver to you in 7 days' time. So do you think the workers asked for a snack like oranges or a snack like chocolate to be delivered in a week's time? Who says oranges? Hands up. Who says chocolate? Hands up. Okay, so divided crowd. These workers overwhelmingly say that in a week's time, they want a healthy snack to be delivered to them. So among the snacks they're choosing among, 74% go for one of the healthy snacks. The researchers then, as promised, come back a week later, and they have all the snacks with them, and they say, unfortunately, though we have brought the snacks, we have not brought the sheet on which you made your choice 7 days ago. So you've got to choose again. And what do you think happens to the choices of these workers? with the passage of a week's time, the snacks are very much reflective of Yuichi's talk. Now the snacks are right in front of you. Which way are they going to go? Chocolate, exactly. So before it was overwhelmingly fruit, now it's overwhelmingly chocolate. Now here's another example. This is another paper by Reed. This time Lowenstein and Kalyana Raman are his collaborators. This is a study done with undergraduates. They're asked to choose among 24 movie videos. And the 24 movie videos have been chosen by the researchers so that half are so-called lowbrow movies, Batman, no insult intended to Batman fans, and highbrow movies, The Seventh Seal, black and white foreign film about the plague. But really good for you. So when these undergraduates are asked what movie they want to watch tonight among these 24, do you think they pick lowbrow or highbrow to watch tonight? Lowbrow, exactly. But what about picking the movie that you're going to watch in 7 days' time? Highbrow, exactly. So the further away the choice is posed, the more it's in the future, the more abstract it is, the less it's about an immediate reward, the more and more we see the highbrow preference expressing itself. Here's another study. This is done with undergraduates at Princeton in Jonathan Cohen's lab, and I'm a collaborator on this paper. Subjects are made thirsty by being asked not to drink for about 3 hours. They come to the lab, and we fed them salty snacks, so they're really desperate. And then we give them a kind of diabolical choice. Would you like 1 sip now or 2 sips in 5 minutes? They're extremely thirsty. And these tiny sips we control the sip, so you can't just sneak a gulp. What do you think the subjects do? 1 sip now or 2 sips in 5 minutes? Yeah, 1 sip now, exactly. 60% go for 1 sip now. But we also ask them questions like this. What do you think the subjects have to say? Same subjects. 1 sip in 20 minutes or 2 sips in 25 minutes? Yeah, exactly. So there's something strange happening. There's something about immediacy that's playing a very special role in all the examples that I've been discussing. Now, the basic psychology here was first documented by actually Herrnstein and Ainsley. Economists have picked this up. I've championed this in my own work. And the basic psychology is that the present gets full weight, and the future, even a future potentially minutes or hours away, gets half weight as we think about our lives. Now let's trace out the consequences of this psychology. My favorite example is exercise, because that's what I don't do. I'm going to make it quantitative just to illustrate how it works. Let's imagine that exercise has an upfront cost of 6. That's the misery of sitting on a sweaty seat in a gym and struggling to keep going when my body says stop, 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 stop. But people tell me that exercise has a delayed benefit of 8. I'll be healthier, I'll be happier in the future if I only exercise today. So in the world I've described, where immediate stuff gets full weight and delayed stuff gets half weight, will David Laibson exercise today? Exactly. So today there's a cost of 6. There's a delayed benefit of 8. The benefit's getting discounted by a half because it's not now. So David today, on Wednesday, says, I do not intend to exercise today. That would be a good prediction for me. But the twist is, how does David on Wednesday feel about exercising on Thursday? So here's the calculus in that case. If I'm going to exercise tomorrow, then I'm going to pay a cost of 6 tomorrow. It's not today, it gets half weight. And I'll get even more delayed benefits of 8. They're also not today, so they get half weight. Now, the costs and the benefits are both in the future. So the half multiplies them both. The total net value to me is +1. So David says, I do not intend to exercise today, but I do plan to exercise tomorrow. And you can see where this is going. It's the story of my life. I once joined a gym. I gave the gym $1,000 for a one-year membership, and I intended to go at least twice a week, probably 3 times a week. So I'd be going like 100 or 150 times to that gym over the next year. How many times did I actually go to the gym over the next year? Yeah, good, 5 times. $200 per visit. Now, I'm not the only person out there who makes this mistake, who buys gym memberships or jogging machines or bicycle exercise machines for my house and then doesn't use them. This is a wonderful study by Delavigne and Malmondier, and they studied gyms in the Boston area, and they found that people were paying on average $75 per month, and that they were going on average 4 times per month. They know that because they have swipe card data. Average cost of $19 per visit. But the interesting thing about this study is you didn't need to be a gym member to actually go to the gym. You could pay on a per visit basis. What was the cost of paying on a per visit basis? Right, less than 19, 10. So here we see it all in a nutshell out there in the field. Now, this phenomenon of good intentions and bad follow-through is the universal human experience. There's no domain in which this does not show up. Let's look at retirement saving now, an area in which I've done a particular focus, had a particular focus. So in this study, we surveyed workers. Out of every 100 workers surveyed in the US, about 2 out of 3 say that they're not saving enough for retirement. Now, people have awareness in this case that they've got a problem. A lot of them have good intentions. Out of every 100 workers, 24 on average plan to raise their 401k savings rate in the next 2 months. But we actually have their administrative data, and we can check to see whether they followed through to make sure that we are not kind of biased by making the check too soon. Rather than going and checking in 2 months, we checked in 4 months. Gave them twice as long. How many on average out of 100 do you think actually did raise their savings rate in their 401k within the next 4 months? Yeah, good. So 3 on average out of 100. Now, the good news is, and this again echoes the insights from Yuichi's talk, the good news is that there are ways to address these problems, ways that have been deployed, and I'm going to show you some of this evidence out there in the field at very low cost in ways that are scalable for our society, indeed, not just in the US, but around the world. The most famous example is auto-enrollment. Now, to explain that, let me first explain the typical way that people join a 401k plan. They come to a firm and they're told, look, as a new employee, you are not a participant in our 401k. To become a participant, you need to fill out 15 minutes of paperwork. It's very easy. We're not intending to create this as a hurdle. It's just the paperwork. Only takes 15 minutes. The problem is that this little 15-minute barrier of paperwork makes all the difference. People keep saying they're going to enroll in the 401k plan, and they keep not getting around to it. It's always a good idea for next weekend. So there's an obvious way to flip this, right? Rather than starting people as a non-participant and telling them they can enroll and get over here, the innovation, which has taken the US by storm, first studied by Madrian and Shea, is to simply start people as participants in the 401k plan and let them opt out if they don't want to be a participant. Now, economically speaking, absolutely nothing has changed, right? This is the same set of choices. We're simply starting them in a different place and giving them the same 2 options. But as you'll see in a second, it makes a night and day difference where we start the worker. So this is called auto-enrollment. Now, let's go back to this issue of procrastination. Suppose you're a die-hard libertarian, and suppose you don't like the idea of me advantaging one or the other outcome by, let's say, auto-enrolling you or not auto-enrolling you. Suppose you want to get people to actually express their preferences. What could you do? Think about it for a second. You could tell new workers that there's a form they've got to fill out as a new employee, just like they have to fill out the healthcare form, the health insurance form, as a new employee, and move the two options over to the left-hand side and say to every worker that's joined a firm, you must choose for yourself. Now, if you force people to choose, then there's no procrastination because it's an obligation of employment. And this is called active choice. So let's now think about a third way to approach changing behavior without fundamentally changing the rewards of being an enrolled participant or being a non-participant. What else could you do to help people who are procrastinators get to the place they want to be, joining the 401k plan? Could reward them. Unfortunately, that's illegal. So turns out you can't, we thought about that one. In the US, you can't pay people to enroll by giving them like $50, though that I think is an excellent idea, especially if they got the $50 in the form of a piece of pizza they could eat right now, or ice cream, or a marshmallow. But amazingly, the last thing that we'll look at, if you take that 15-minute barrier and you make it a 15-second barrier, if you just make this enrollment process easy from 15 minutes to 15 seconds, you also get a very significant change in behavior. So that's called quick enrollment. So let's now look at the data. I'm going to kind of put together a whole bunch of studies here. When you tell workers, welcome to my company, here's a phone number, call it to enroll in the 401k plan, only 40% enroll in the 401k plan. So 6 out of 10 workers lose the match. When you make enrollment easy, so it's just check a box enrollment, quick enrollment, rather than having to do a lot of work, they're just checking a box, dropping something that's pre-posted back in the mail. You make it not a 15-minute process, but a 15-second process. Enrollment rates rise to about 50 or 60%. When you require people to choose, when you say, you must decide for yourself, there is no backstop, there is no automatic outcome, you are obligated to choose, you get a 70% enrollment rate. And when you auto-enroll people, you get a 90% enrollment rate. Now, the economics hasn't changed across these 4 cases. It's still, you can join or you cannot join the plan. But the way the choice architecture is created creates vast differences in the behavior of workers in these firms, with vast consequences for our society. Now, we know a bit about the brain's role in these decisions. Again, a topic we could talk about for a long time. I want to focus your attention on 3 brain regions: the frontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, a little bit lower beneath the frontal cortex, and the dopamine reward system, sometimes called the limbic system. And what we're increasingly thinking is that when we make a choice that rejects the immediate pleasant thing and goes for the delayed harder thing, whether it's through a mental representation of the sort that Yuichi discussed, or whether it's through some other channel or some other mechanism, it is the frontal cortex that is representing that delayed reward and enabling the individual to reject the immediate pleasure of watching TV and choose the delayed option, which involves maybe the misery of going through 15 minutes of paperwork. So it's this frontal cortical region that seems to be active when people are engaging in something that we would call self-regulation. So here it is in blue. So here's the region that's essentially saying, stay on your diet, join the 401k, stop smoking, do your homework. It's executive function, and it's in the analytic cortex, or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And here's the dopamine reward system telling us how to have fun. Now, all of these ideas translate very naturally from the domain of financial choice to the domain of health behaviors. And I want to show you a few examples of that. So there's lots of similarities. Individuals and society have many aligned goals: to be healthier, to be more nutritious, to exercise. Education, as we saw at the very beginning of the talk, won't succeed in solving these problems. People already know they should exercise. People already know that a Big Mac has a lot of calories. Individuals want behavior change, just not right now, not tonight, not today, next month. We want to improve our diets. We want to increase our physical activity. We want to stop smoking. We see that in surveys very powerfully. We want to adhere to the therapeutic recommendations our physicians give us. We want to utilize wellness programs. The problem is that we have actions that end up being unaligned with our intentions. Our intentions are to do all these things, and our actions in the moment are to sit on the couch and eat a bag of Doritos or whatever is your favorite poison. So let me give you some examples of how these same concepts can be applied to the domain of health behaviors. So here's a study that tries to empower good intentions. In this study, we were trying to get the subjects to simply get a flu shot. And we had 3 arms in this study. In one arm, the control arm, people got a normal informational mailing. And in these treatment arms, we tried to get people to mentally commit to a course of action. In the first treatment arm, they mentally commit by getting the normal mailing about when the free flu shots are available, and also by getting a prime or a prompt to make a plan to go and get the flu shot on a particular date. A plan that they would communicate only to themselves, not to us. In the second arm, they had a stronger plan because now they were going to make not only a date plan, but also a time of day plan. Specify mentally to themselves the day and the time of day that they were going to go and get the free flu shot. So here are the different conditions. Here's the control condition. Employees are simply informed of the times at which the free flu shot is available. Here's the first treatment arm, where in addition to getting the times that the free flu shot is available, employees are also prompted here to make a plan, to make a mental commitment about going and doing the thing that they know they should do. And then the second treatment arm is the same as the first treatment arm. Again, here's the times of the free flu shots, and here's the plan. And here we're including not just the day of the week, the month, and the day, but also the time. So let's see how this representation of their intentions, which is now being made concrete, affects their behavior. So in the control condition, 33% of the subjects actually go and get the flu shot. In the first treatment arm, where they're asked to make an actual plan and put a date down, it rises to 34.6, modest effect. And in the second treatment arm, we get up to 37.2. So these are not night and day differences, but for a few drops of free ink, essentially, we're driving behavior in the right direction in a meaningful way. Now here's another example. This time we're going to actually deploy the active choice intervention that I told you about earlier. Maybe some of you know about home delivery of chronic medication. I have a thyroid that doesn't always function properly, and I take levothyroxine. And I could receive my levothyroxine in 2 ways. I could either go to the pharmacy every 30 days and stand in a long line of sneezing people and pick it up, or I could have it delivered to my home not every 30 days, but every 90 days. So I get a 90-day supply at home. Turns out it's cheaper for the people providing the medicine to mail it to my house than it is to hand it to me in the pharmacy. So my co-payments are lower when I get it at home, and that's true for all the medications that we studied. And I don't spend time in the pharmacy, and I don't have the chaos of standing around people who are sick. And indeed, the home delivery has a slightly lower error rate in terms of misfilled prescriptions. So you'd think it would be just a win-win-win opportunity. On the other hand, there's some people who really want to go to the pharmacy. Maybe they know their pharmacist. Maybe they don't want something delivered to their doorstep because their neighborhood isn't safe. So there's lots of reasons for people to go both ways on this one. For some people, home delivery is right. For some people, pharmacy pickup is right. Again, I emphasize home delivery is less expensive, but that's not all there is to life. So one of the puzzles that we see in the world is that when you give people the option of home delivery and you tell people, here's the number, call it, to enroll in home delivery, almost nobody does, despite all of its benefits. And that puzzled us, and working with John Beshears, James Choi, and Bridget Madrian, we introduced an active choice intervention to get people to think about this very important decision: how do you want to receive your medicine? When we had people make an active choice, we went from a very, very low take-up rate to essentially a 50% take-up rate. Now, I want to emphasize, in this case, active choice is particularly appealing because people split 50-50. Half of them want pharmacy pickup, 48%. Half of them want home delivery, 52%. So it's especially useful to draw this decision out of people rather than having a default one way or the other. So here's the actual study. You can see the effect very visually. Only a small class of the drugs that people receive are eligible for home delivery. So that's why we're only talking about 6% going to 18%. That's half of the drugs here that are eligible for home delivery or being delivered through home delivery. And so you see that we tripled the usage rate of home delivery simply by requiring that people make an active choice. Now, this had enormous economic consequences at the firm at which we studied this. For the firm saved $350,000 in that 1 year because it moved thousands of scripts from pharmacy pickup to home delivery, which is more economically efficient. And the members of the plan, the firm's employees, saved $820,000 that year because they had lower co-payments as a consequence of having their medicine delivered at home, at least for the half that chose home delivery. And that's just one company in 1 year. This intervention, which is now widely used, has saved hundreds of millions of dollars in the US healthcare system. Now, there's one more frontier I want to tell you about. I've lost track of the time. How many minutes do I have left? Okay. So, in all of this discussion of self-control, there's also the issue of self-awareness. To what extent do we know that we have a self-control problem? And to what extent can that help us manage ourselves? Now, when I joined that gym, and I gave $1,000, and then I went 5 times, I showed a shockingly low level of self-knowledge, especially for someone who's worked on this topic his whole life. A little embarrassing. Indeed, advised dissertations on the topic of exercise and people who join gyms and don't go. That paper was written before I joined the gym and didn't go. But we are a little bit aware of our self-control problems. We're not completely ignorant of them. So I want to talk about a study that begins to explore the idea that people might actually be able to manage their self-control problems using, again, some of the ideas that Yuichi highlighted. So in this study, again with John Beshears, James Choi, Bridget Madrian, and Jung-Suk Kong, we gave our subjects $100 real each, and we asked them to allocate that money across 2 accounts. One account we called the Freedom Account. They could take the money out whenever they wanted to, but as long as the money stayed in the account, they earned a 22% annualized rate of interest. Pretty good deal. But there was also the Goal Account that had the same spectacular annualized rate of interest, but the Goal Account was illiquid up to a goal date that was set by the subjects themselves and then liquid thereafter. Now, the illiquidity was a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So up to the goal date, say we're doing the experiment now. Maybe I set the goal date for July when I'm going to be on vacation and I'll want the extra money. So up until the goal date, if I take the money out, I pay a 10% penalty. After the goal date, if I take the money out, there's no penalty. So it's an incentive to kind of force myself to leave the money in the account and benefit from the high rate of interest. So if I did this with you, how many of you would put some of the $100 into the Goal Account, thereby restraining yourself? Raise your hand if you put some money into the Goal Account. Okay, so it's, I'd say, most of the room. We find that about 85% of the subjects in our study, a representative sample of US adults, we've done this with nearly 1,000 subjects across 2 studies. About 85% put some money into the goal account. But it's misleading to talk about the fraction of people that put some money in the goal account. I want to focus on the fraction of dollars that end up in the goal account, aggregating across all the people. So let's ask, what fraction of the dollars in the study end up in the goal account? For someone who puts nothing, that would be 0%. For someone who puts all, it would be 100%. And people can put any amount they want. So we're going to be averaging across all the subjects. So when the goal account has a 10% penalty for early withdrawal, we see that 35% of the money ends up in the goal account in the study. Now, we also ran other arms in the same study, and we randomized subjects across these arms. In the next arm I want to tell you about, we had a higher penalty for early withdrawals in the goal account. How did this affect the fraction of dollars that ended up in the goal account in this between subject design? So these are different subjects randomly chosen from the US population. So who thinks it went up? Raise your hand. Who thinks it went down? Raise your hand. Who has no idea? Yeah, so it's interesting. It's not obvious, and you split basically 50-50. We also were very interested to know what would happen here. We find that it went up. That's a significant difference using a 5% significance threshold. So a higher penalty begets more contributions to the goal account. We also ran another arm of the study. In this arm, the goal account was completely illiquid up until the goal date that they set for themselves. Again, different subjects drawn randomly from the US population. So now the goal account is completely unavailable as a source of liquidity until the goal date. So what do you think now? Did this last arm, let's compare 43 to what's going to come in here, did making this account completely illiquid make it more attractive or less attractive? Who says more attractive? Raise your hands. Who says less attractive? Raise your hands. Who says I don't have a clue? Okay, there should be more I don't have a clues out there. It goes up again. Now, I don't want you to get the message that we should make savings accounts completely illiquid, but I do want to suggest that people have some insight into their self-control problems as evidenced by this sort of data. They like, these subjects, representative of the US population, like the idea that the money we're giving them is going to get locked away until their goal date. Now, we also ran another arm where we gave them a choice among 3 accounts. So now they could allocate the money any way they wanted across these 3 different accounts. What do we see now? The completely illiquid goal account attracts 34% of the funds. The goal account with a 10% penalty ends up attracting 16% of the dollars, and the fully liquid account ends up attracting 50% of the dollars. So now we're running a head-to-head race between 2 different kinds of illiquid accounts, at least these, in this setting, with the subjects receiving money from us, so it's not their money, it's the money we're giving them. They prefer locking it up 2 to 1 relative to having it in an account with a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So let me summarize, and then we'll come to the Q&A part of the evening. So first I want to just emphasize that good intentions deviate from our impatient actions. We humans intend to wait for the 2 marshmallows, but very often go for the 1 marshmallow instead. Our actions are often inconsistent with our good intentions. Present bias, this idea that what happens right now counts fully, and what happens in the future counts half, explains this gap between our good intentions and our actions. Because when we look into the future, we say, in the future, I'll do the right thing. But when we get there, we want to go for immediate gratification. Scalable, inexpensive, and often free interventions, or nudges, can align our intentions and our actions. Now, what's the formula if you're running a firm or a government or any organization for designing one of these interventions that's going to be effective? Well, first you want to identify good intentions of your employees and your customers. or members of your organization. Secondly, you want to create a choice architecture that enables those good intentions to be easily acted out. You want to empower the good intentions. You want to help people follow through on those good intentions by making that easy to do. So we've talked about a few of them. It could be easy or quick enrollment. It could be active choice. It could be default enrollment. It could be commitment even, locking down the behavior, tying your hands ahead of time. But there's something to be wary of here that I'm sure many of you have already thought of, which is the problem of going too far, of intervening too forcefully and creating something that actually feels abusive or offensive or kind of beyond what we would all agree is an appropriate type of nudge. So we need to beware nudges that feel coercive. To give you one example, in New York City, towards the end of Mayor Bloomberg's term, again about 10 years ago, there was a proposal that his administration made that allowed Coke to be, or soft drinks, sugary soft drinks, to be sold in all these sizes, but not sizes above 16 ounces. So if you were 17 ounces, no go. And the view here was, look, it's just not a good idea health-wise to drink that much sugary soda. And, you know, we can argue about the merits of this proposal, but New Yorkers hated it. And it was an example, I think, of these ideas taken too far. Now, this is a nudge, right? This is a nudge to drink smaller size sugary sodas. But it's a nudge that New Yorkers and the New York court system found offensive. So as we think about how we're going to create the right choice architecture, how we're going to create the maximally socially efficient environment to help people thrive, even as we make good behavior easy and make maybe bad behavior hard, we want to always remind ourselves not to go too far. Thank you very much.